Welcome back. I'm Dr. Slater Sarah. We're continuing in African Black psychology, discussing Africentric models of Black mental health. We're beginning with looking at Akbar's models on African mental disorders. And we've already introduced Naim Akbar's work. In his work, he identified some specific disorders: the alien self, anti-self, self-destructive, and organic disorders. From the alien self perspective, he discusses how African people in their mental disorder alienate themselves from their natural African orientation and operate with a blatant rejection of their natural African disposition with things such as materialistic goals, their natural African orientation. These are in moving to the anti-self, they have an hostility toward African and all things related to it, towards being African and all things related to it. So these are the folks who will say, I'm not African, I'm not the Jungle Bunny music listener, those types of things. Akbar's third perspective is the self-destructive African mental disorder. And this is where individual operates from a jungle, parasitic, dog-eat-dog type orientation. Remember, African people emphasize the collective self, collectivity, survival of the group. And this self-destructive orientation emphasizes survival of the fittest, stepping on next to get to the top, which is based on Akbar's model and sign of African mental disorder. And finally, the organic disorder, which is a dysfunctional African behaviors. We can say things such as changing your skin color through bleaching to look like that of the white man as a significant disorder. Kobe Kambon also introduces in his work, My Jegna, which we talked about in the previous unit, his theoretical perspective of cultural misorientation. So remember, we talked about the ultimate striving for the African personality should be that toward that of the development of a strong African self-consciousness. So when one operates with a strong African self-consciousness, they have a strong sense of cultural identity. They know who they are. When a person operates under cultural misorientation, there is an alien or anti-African worldview, that superimpose upon the natural African self-consciousness through intense, prolonged, and pervasive alien cultural oppression of African people. So this happened throughout the enslavement time period, which we talked about at the beginning of the course, where African people were told that black was bad, that it is God's design for African people to be enslaved, that during the enslavement time period, of course, this is after all the great things that African people accomplished on the continent of Africa, the European colonizers came in and challenged the psyche of the African. So this Eurocentric cognitive structure became introduced into the African psyche, and the distortions then became a part of the basic beliefs and attitudes and the behavior and actions of African people. So then these distortions begin to be reflected in skin bleaching and nose contouring and wigs, the wearing of wigs, to imply that the natural nap or curl that comes off of a person's head is not as beautiful or is ugly, and the other styles are considered beautiful. So this idea that Kambon introduces in cultural misorientation is important because it represents this unnatural rearrangement of normal relationships. So for the African, who is traditionally collective, spiritual, and it reflects then the African representing or engaging in individualistic posture, operating from a materialistic orientation, operating inside of an anti-Black or anti-African social orientation, and ultimately the African then living under domination and cultural oppression of the European worldview. And that reflects this cultural misorientation. Some additional examples are this notion of menticide that comes from Dr. Bobby Wright, and it refers to the virtual depletion of an African cultural disposition or prerogative in African people. So when we talk about this depletion, the person has no sense of their African identity or African self. they have a mentally disordered condition that leads them to literally culturally self-destruct. So when we culturally self-destruct, we do things such as gluing wigs onto our head to imply something is beautiful. We try to erase the African looking features from our face and our body. And that is mental disorder or psychopathology in African people. So this represents an anti-African self-consciousness where the African feels like they must operate inside a European context, and they actually allow the Eurocentric concept, the European worldview concept, to masquerade as normal, natural, and healthy, and normal, natural, healthy functioning as an effective psychological cultural orientation for the African. So European people would have you believe that to burn your hair is normal or natural, to glue something on your hair, hiding your natural, beautiful, nappy hair under the bottom. While you're gluing the wig on your hair, you are destroying your roots. You are destroying your hair growth, right? Then your African nose isn't considered beautiful because you have to contour to remove the beauty of the wide nose. Skin bleaching, all of these things. So there are several different phenomena of cultural misorientation, which again is represented by the burning of hair, perming or pressing, demeaning behaviors towards dark skin or stereotypically Black or African facial features and body types, a reliance on Eurocentric rituals and cultural values, and the comfortable use of the N-word. Oh, I said it. The comfortable use of the N-word is a sign of cultural misorientation. So if you walking around calling your friend, your mama, your daddy, and them the N-word, then you are outside of your African mind. Just like if you are burning your hair or gluing a wig onto your head, you are outside of your African mind. Just like if you are bleaching your skin or you have stereotypic or demeaning or derogatory terms towards people who have African features, you are outside of your African mind. If you are operating with Eurocentric rituals and cultural values, you are outside of your African mind. So Azibo also sought to look at models of African mental disorder. He wrote a book on African psychology from a historical perspective, and he talked about and created a nosology specifically to detail African disorders and behaviors that are ordered, and oftentimes these behaviors were centered around its connection to African worldview, and you can take a look in your text for that. So that concludes our discussion on African mental function and ability. We will continue in the future. I am Dr. Slater Sarah. Peace.